Welcome to our 7th episode of our summer series on the history behind the hymns. Today, we're exploring a hymn from the year 1527. I'm your host, Lauralee Siemens. This is our summer season. I'm telling the stories of our great hymns. This podcast tells the story of the church in chronological order. We started with the story of Jesus, and we have traveled through history into the 1800s. For this summer, we're going to tell the story of the church in chronological order through our great hymns. So, enjoy this summer season. The year is 1735, and Robert Roberson is born on September 27th in Norfolk, England. Yes, his name was Robert Roberson. His father died when he was very young, and so he was raised by his mother. During this period, having your father die was more than just the grief of losing a father. It meant you would lose your only way of getting an income or having any significant part of society. England in the 1700s was a society deeply divided by class. The rich and noble lived lives of relative luxury, while the poor struggled to make ends meet. The gap between the wealthy and the impoverished was huge, with little opportunity for social mobility. This class structure meant that birth largely determined one's fate. For the poor, life was a constant battle for survival. Most of the poor lived in rural areas and worked as agricultural laborers, while others crowded into rapidly growing cities, seeking work in the developing factories of the Industrial Revolution. However, the poor faced relentless hardship in the countryside and the city. Food was a constant concern. The diet of the poor mainly consisted of bread, porridge, and the occasional piece of meat. Vegetables were scarce, and fresh fruit was a luxury very few could afford. Malnutrition was common, and that led to various health problems and a high infant mortality rate. In 1744, at the age of 14, Roberson was sent to London to apprentice with a barber. His mother hoped he would find a career and make something of himself. However, he indulged in a wild and reckless lifestyle. He joined a gang, and the boys caused all kinds of trouble throughout the streets of London. 3 years later, at the age of 17, Robert Roberson was running the streets of London. He was part of a gang. He didn't care at all about anything spiritual. He was a young man going down a very bad path. He had only been a small boy when his dad died, and in the 18th century in England, there was really no social welfare system, meaning that he had to go to work while he was still very young, and he didn't have a father to guide or steady him. All of these things led Robert to fall in with some very, very bad friends. One day, the gang was harassing a drunk gypsy. They began to pour liquor over her and demanded that she tell their fortunes for free. The drunk gypsy lifted her finger and pointed it straight at Robert. She told him that he was going to live to see his children and his grandchildren. For some reason, this really struck the young boy. If I'm going to live to see my children and my grandchildren, I really need to change my way of living. I can't keep living like this if I'm going to have children and grandchildren. Over the next few nights, Robert was really haunted by this experience with the gypsy. A few nights later, Robert, half serious and half in fun, decided to go to a tent meeting to hear the Methodist preacher George Whitefield. He made a joke that they should go see a God person since they had just seen a witch. Robert encouraged his gang to go to hear the Methodist. They would go to heckle the gathering. Let's go laugh at all the deluded Methodists. That night, George Whitefield preached this text. O generation of vipers, who has warned you to flee from the wrath to come? This passage came from Matthew chapter 3, verse 7. Robert knew instantly that George Whitefield was preaching to him. He had just seen a gypsy to talk about his future, and now, from the Bible, he was hearing that he needed to be warned about the wrath that was to come. I have talked about George Whitefield in past episodes, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. This message impacted Robert, and he knew he had to make peace with God. And so he did. He gave his life to God, and God completely changed him. Over the next 2 years, Robert's life completely changed. He opened a barbershop and became successful. But then, after 2 years, he felt God calling him into ministry. So he closed his barbershop and began his work as a preacher. In 1758, Robert became a Baptist minister. He left the Methodists and moved into the Baptist denomination. A year into his ministry as a Baptist pastor in the year 1757, Robert preached a sermon for Pentecost. He found his inspiration in a passage from 1 Samuel chapter 7. This is what he read. Samuel took a stone and set it upon Mizpah and Shen, and called it Ebenezer. For he said, "Till now the Lord has helped us." So the Philistines were subdued and did not again enter the territory of Israel, and the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the day of Samuel. The word Ebenezer in Hebrew means stone of hope. Eben means stone, and Ezer means help. Samuel placed this stone as a lasting reminder of God's assistance. He wanted the people to remember not just for a few days, but for years, for decades, for generations, how God had rescued his people when they humbled themselves before him. At that time, the Israelites were vulnerable and faced immediate danger from their enemies. They did not deserve God's rescue, having been persistently unfaithful. Yet God intervened with thunder in his love for his covenant people, throwing Israel's enemies into confusion. Robert wanted to write a song for his sermon based on this passage in Samuel, so he wrote these words. Come, thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of God's unchanging love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I'm come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He, to rescue me from danger, interposed his precious blood. As the years passed, Robert's preaching changed. He tried to be more welcoming to people, and some people claimed he became a Unitarian, preaching that all paths lead to God. Robert assured them that he believed Jesus was the only way to God. However, the fact that people said he believed this showed what his preaching sounded like to the congregation. Slowly, Robert moved farther and farther away from where he started. Eventually, he lost his church and he wandered completely from God. Imagine yourself seated in a rattling stagecoach. The rhythmic clatter of hooves and the jostling wheels over rough roads fill the air. The countryside is whizzing by, a blur of green fields and distant hills. But the atmosphere is more contemplative inside the stagecoach. Opposite you sits a man. His demeanor is distant, burdened, and he is lost in thoughts. The man is Robert Roberson, a preacher who has strayed from his faith and is grappling with spiritual desolation. The other passenger is a young, beautiful woman. Her face is bright with the joy of her faith, and she is completely oblivious to her companion's inner toil. But God, in his providence and sovereignty, has put this young woman exactly where she needs to be. She begins to hum a familiar tune, breaking the silence of the stagecoach with a soft, uplifting melody. She begins to hum, "Come thou fount of every blessing." Her voice, filled with genuine warmth, soon gives way to words. She looks at the man across, who seems in extreme turmoil as he hears her song. So she begins to share how this hymn has been such an encouragement to her and how she loves to sing this hymn. Robert listens. Initially, he has a pang of recognition, but then a growing discomfort. He shifts in his seats. He tries to divert the conversation away from the hymn, but this young woman will not stop talking about how much she loves this hymn and how encouraging it is to her. Sensing that he was reluctant and annoyed, she turns to him and asks if he's ever heard this hymn and what is his opinion of the hymn. "Madame," he responds. His voice is heavy with regret. "I am the poor, unhappy man who wrote that hymn many years ago. And I would give 1,000 worlds if I had them to enjoy that feeling again." For a moment, silence envelops the stagecoach. The woman is not sure how to respond. The woman's eyes soften with understanding and compassion. Finally, she says, "Sir, the streams of mercy are still flowing." Her words, that simple sentence, pierced through that hardened heart. He sat in stunned silence, feeling the weight of his estrangement from God and the hope that her simple and yet profound statement was true. The words of his hymn that he had written echoed in his mind, and for the first time in years, he began to feel a divine presence. As the stagecoach continued its journey, Robert's heart began its journey. This encounter with the young woman, the unexpected ministry of his own hymn, and her witness stirred something deep within him. He realized that the mercy he once sang about was still accessible. It was still flowing, just like she said. By the end of the journey, Robert Roberson was a changed man. The spiritual desolation that had plagued him had lifted, and it had been replaced with this renewed sense of faith and purpose. His fellowship with the Lord had been restored, not through some grand gesture or dramatic revelation, but through a young woman's humble, persistent faith and the timeless truth of a hymn that continues even today to resonate with believers. This simple yet profound encounter is a testament to the enduring power of faith, the importance of fellowship, and God's boundless mercy, which can reach us even in our darkest moments. God restored his relationship with Robert and also restored him to ministry. He continued to write. However, in his later years, his writing is hard to understand and doesn't make a lot of sense, and some wonder if he suffered from mental health issues or the beginning of dementia. On June 9th, 1787, Robert Roberson died at age 51. He passed away suddenly while visiting Birmingham, England. "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing" remains one of the church's most beloved and widely sung hymns. The lyrics express a deep sense of gratitude and a reliance on God's grace. If you are someone who had once lived for God, served God, and now you've wandered away from him, maybe, like Robert Robertson, you wandered away slowly, even with good intentions, wanting to make the gospel easier for other people, you watered it down until eventually it didn't exist anymore. And now maybe you've wandered so far away from God that you can't even feel his mercy and his grace and his love anymore. But know that God's mercy is still flowing today. The same grace and the same love that you experienced once is available today. Call out to God and ask Him to renew you. Today, I am so thankful that the Living Stones Quartet has allowed me to use their song to end our podcast episode. I have found these guys when I was searching on YouTube, and I absolutely love them. They are so fantastic. This is a group of men who live in India, and they have such great harmony. And I know you're absolutely going to love this. I'm going to read a little bit about them here. The Living Stones Quartet got its start with 4 guys deciding to minister the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ through their gift of singing. Thank you so much for letting me use your music, and I hope all of you enjoy this song.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I've come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. Oh, to grace how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above.
Thank you for listening to today's episode on the history of the hymns. We will be returning to our regular church history podcast in September. If you want to hear more podcasts, check out my website, lauraleesiemens.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share these stories with your friends. We'll see you next week.